Now you're hurling. Lorna Porca with Tomás McCarthy on WLR.
Thanks to PwC Waterford.
Points the shoulders at the uprights. Makes no mistakes, and the opener to Waterford. We wanted a good start. We've got it.
Lying in the dark, this hell we've endured. Born in a time of no glory. Blood, sweat and tears for 39 years. The time for McCarthy has come.
The hurlers have yet to deliver. They might do it today.
Deep, aim high, pull and let fly. The Dacia has come for its glory. We tried in the past, this time it will last. 3 ships set sail for glory.
Great score by Milan. Great score by Milan.
Hurling is a game, your skill it demands. Wisdom and wit they play their part. Champions are made from legends of past. 3 ships set sail in our hearts.
He's on the run out. Takes his shot. It's a goal! It's a goal! The man has done it again. All friends of Ireland, the jewel of the crown of Waterford.
Aim high, the fans will cry. Our name will be on that trophy. We'll never give up till we lift the cup. McCarthy will tell our story.
Good catch again by Hartley, who's having a blinder. With the ball in the middle of the half. He fails to hold it. Back to Owen Kelly. Can he get the equaliser? He does! Superb score by Owen Kelly.
Dig deep, aim high, pull and let fly. The Dacia has come for its glory. We tried in the past, this time it will last. 3 ships set sail for glory.
Long ball, breaking down to Tony Brown. He pulls, gets goal! It's a goal! Ken O'Connor! Lovely score by Ken. Brother, getting on to Fergal. He takes a shot. It's over the bar! It's over the bar on the bounce of the lead.
Yes, Fergal Hartley was the man who captained Waterford to that first Munster title in 39 years, as Justin McCarthy's men took down Tipperary by 2-23 to 3-12 in Páirce Queeve. And delighted to say that the Ballygunner All-Star joins me on the line now. And Fergal, how would you describe that feeling of finally getting your hands on that Munster trophy?
Yeah, sure. Tomás was huge. I mean, I was 30 years of age at the time, and I'd been playing with the county since I was 19 at that stage, so I'd been around the block a little bit. And, you know, if you think of it back in the day, when I started, it was straight knockout championship. There was no back doors. There was no round robins. And my first year, 6 years playing, we were beaten in every game. So we're knocked out first round every year for 6 years. So, I mean, when that's the start you have to your inter-county career, you know, days like that you don't even dare to dream sometimes. And when it finally came around, if you can recall, on the same team, Owen Kelly was in his first year. So for guys like Owen and John Milan was in his second year, and so on. And you had lots of other young players as well. You know, for them, they knew no defeat, I suppose, to some extent. But for certainly players like myself and Peter Creeley and, you know, Tom Feeney, Paul Flynn and so on, we had Tony Brown, we had our fair share of defeats. So, as I said, sometimes you don't even believe it would ever happen. So the feeling of relief, ecstasy, everything, every emotion you can think of, it was incredible.
Yeah, like there's that iconic image, Fergal, of Brian Greene falling to his knees at the final whistle. Like, it must have meant a bit more to the likes of yourselves, Brian. You mentioned Paul Flynn, Peter Queally. Like, had seen some dark days in a Waterford shirt, including that loss to Kerry in '93.
Yeah, and that was my first time. I was a sub in '92. It was my first year actually playing. My championship debut was against Kerry in '93, and the only ever Munster championship victory they've ever had. And as you say, dark days in '95. Then down in Páirce against Tipperary, and I think we were beaten by 19 points, and so on and so forth. So there was many bad days, and say Brian Greene as well. I think Brian would have been 31 at the time, and had seen a lot of bad days. And as you say, that's an iconic image of the very last ball. I think he was in possession when the final whistle was blown, and even though we knew it was coming, you knew from the last 7 or 8 minutes maybe that we were as good as home and hose, but you were kind of almost, you didn't want to let your foot off the pedal to some extent, because I suppose it happened so many times in the past against teams like Tipperary. If you remember, even the year before, we played Limerick and we were 11 points up, and it looked like a game we were going to win comfortably, and we were beaten by, I think, 3 in the end. And so I suppose we had come through games like that where we came out the wrong side and let games slip. So even though we knew it was coming, I suppose, and we were able to enjoy the last few minutes to some extent, it was still very nervy times until the final whistle was actually blown, and the level of relief and every other emotion, as I say, you can think of was unparalleled.
Yeah, and like, you accepted the cup, Fergal, from Christy Cooney of the Munster Council, and the president, Mary McAleese, was also in Páirce Queeve that day. Had you prepared a speech beforehand?
No, absolutely not. In hindsight, Tomas, I wish I did, because God, anything that came into my head just came out, unfortunately, on the day, and I didn't want to tempt fate by preparing a speech. And I've seen people there with their printed out notes and all that kind of stuff, and I said to myself, no, I did think about would I or wouldn't I, but I said no, I'm not going to tempt fate. So, and actually, would you believe it, I remember this, I was just caught up in the ecstasy of the whole thing at the time, and going around hugging other players and so on, and just caught up in the whole emotion of the occasion, and I forgot all about the fact that I had to go make a speech. So even right up to the moment, there was probably 3 or 4 minutes by the time the final whistle went and we had to go up the steps, and I'd forgotten about the fact that I had to go and actually make a speech. So I probably should have used that 3 or 4 minutes more productively to actually start thinking through some of the things I was to say. But no, I went up and I started rattling off all sorts of stuff, so God knows what came out of me. I haven't cared to look back at it, to be honest, but no, probably should have had a bit more preparation on that day for sure. But I remember the president, and it's normally a great honour to meet the president. I think it was the first Munster final, if I'm not mistaken, that she actually any president was actually present at that. I may be wrong in that, but ordinarily a huge honour to meet the president and to captain a team and to introduce all your team to the president and whatnot. But certainly on a day like that, when it's a huge amount of nervous tension, it was probably something that we could have done without, because I suppose before a game, just before throwing and whatnot, and you're riled up, and you're everyone has their own little routine, and you have to go through a completely different routine by trying to be calm and trying to be respectful and so on and so forth to the president. So it was a very unusual, it's surreal to some extent, as they ordinarily a huge honour, but maybe on a day like that there's probably something that you could have done without.
Yeah, I think you proclaimed that the real famine was over, Fergal, a bit like Richie Stakelin from Tipperary a few years previously, but it was a nice touch. I think you mentioned Gerald McCarthy, the previous manager, and also Sean Connan, Stephen Frampton, who'd retired the previous year. Like, they were clearly in your mind when you're up on the podium.
Yeah, and I do remember that the three players in particular, I mentioned Sean Connan, Stephen Frampton and Billy O'Sullivan, because all the three of those I think had played for 14 years, if I'm not mistaken. All three of them potentially for 14 years, but certainly a long time. I know Billy and Stephen were definitely 14 years, and Sean was thereabouts as well. I don't know the exact number for Sean, but it was hugely disappointed for those guys because they'd been around so long, and I suppose one year they packed it in, and we went on, and out of nowhere really went on to win a Munster Championship, because I'm not sure to remember the National League campaign of that year. It wasn't a particularly successful National League campaign, and there was nothing to suggest we were going to go on and win a Munster Championship. In fact, all the indicators were we were probably going in the wrong direction. So for those three guys who had laboured so hard and had given so much to Waterford, your heart would go out to them. And I know they'd love to see us going and winning, but it must have been bittersweet for them as well. If you put yourself in their shoes, to feel that you could have been there and you deserved to be there for sure, and you didn't. And Gerald McCarthy as well. I mean, McCarthy had done so much for Waterford hurling, and was a guy that I know sometimes when a manager comes in from the outside, there's always an expectation that they're getting something for it. But Gerald McCarthy was a man who just threw his himself into this with everything he had, and is a man that everybody, to a man, I think had absolutely the most respect for. And it was just a pity, we couldn't have done something similar in his reign, because I suppose in '98 was probably a breakthrough year to some extent, and we were nearly there. I mean, Flinner had a 65 in the Munster final to go on and win it before in the drawn game, and just curled wide at the last minute. And that's how close Gerald McCarthy was, and certainly he would have deserved that for sure. Yeah,
and you mentioned there, Fergal, that things didn't go to plan during the National League campaign. You lost to Dublin up in Parnell Park the day after St Patrick's Day. But was it a kind of a trip to Antrim that kind of turned your season a bit unexpectedly?
You obviously know the story there. Yeah, I remember the Dublin game in Parnell Park, and I remember even in his restroom afterwards, because Dublin at the time probably weren't going as well as they have been in recent years. I know they've been a little bit hit and miss, but they've been certainly far more consistent in recent years than they would have been back then. And we lost to Dublin in the National League, and I remember there even been a bit of aggro in the dressing room afterwards, players very frustrated and questioning everything. That always happens when you lose, in a game that you expect that you should have won. Everybody questions everything. And it wasn't a contented dressing room after the Dublin game for sure. I recall that. I suppose going up to Antrim, and again, being honest, as captain of the team, I remember approaching Justin and saying we didn't want to go to Antrim. It was 2 weeks before the Cork game, and we felt we should have been playing maybe a first tier team. We were playing Cork 2 weeks later. We felt we should have been playing maybe Wexford, like Kilkenny and Offaly at the time were still going very strong. Limerick, Clare, someone like that. We felt going to Antrim, it was obviously a long way to go, and secondly, we weren't going to be there, with the best respect to Antrim, we weren't going to be playing a tier 1 team. And in terms of preparation for playing against Cork 2 weeks later, we didn't feel, and that was a general consensus, I think, of the senior players in the team. And I approached Justin saying, look, we think we should be playing a stronger opposition. And Justin was a man who knew what he wanted, and as is a right, he was the manager of the team. It was his decision. We only made an approach, but we were going to Antrim, and that was it. And some aspects of the trip to Antrim were almost catastrophic to some extent. It ended up being a fantastic weekend for all the wrong reasons.
In what way, Fergal?
What?
In what way? Well,
we arrived up there it was nearly midnight when we were arriving up there after travelling really from, we met and had our breakfast that morning, or brunch or whatever you'd like to call it, that morning around 11 o'clock, and got on a train I think around 1 o'clock from Waterford to Dublin, and then had to get connection over to a Dublin train to the north, or did we get a bus? But anyway, whatever, we got a bus from Dublin then, and we were travelling for 10, 11 hours, and players were hungry and getting irate and whatnot, and we arrived up there at around 11:30. And I remember, in fairness, as you'd always get when you go to Antrim or down any of these places, we got a huge feed. We finished eating this food at around 12 o'clock, 12:30 at night, an absolutely feed of a festival of food. It was superb. And we went out for a walk in the fresh air, and we were 2 weeks out from playing championship, and everyone was frustrated and annoyed with themselves. And basically, I remember there was an old woman sleeping out a pub, and just about to close up. And anyway, we had a bit of a conflab and a kind of a mini huddle to see, right, some players said, will we go for a drink and just get us out of our system and what. And anyway, between the jigs and the reels, we said we'd go in and we'd have 2 drinks and we'd go to bed and help us to sleep, because we weren't going to sleep after this big feed, and we were going to be fresh for the following day when we played Antrim. And anyway, those 2 drinks didn't go to plan, as can sometimes happen when you put 30 lads inside in a small pub, right. And we got out of there about 5 o'clock in the morning, and now everyone knew, after having a whale of a time, and everyone kind of knew, right, this isn't what we should have done. And but got up the following day, and obviously nobody was saying anything to Justin about what went on the night before, and all looking at each other a little bit sheepishly. But there was a bit of a spirit about us because we were after having a great crack the night before, and we knew we weren't well prepared going out to play Antrim. But we played great. We played great hurling, albeit we were suffering a little bit. I think the game was around 2:30, 3 o'clock, and then thereafter, then Justin, which we weren't expecting, said to the lads, if you want to have a couple of pints, you can have a couple of pints.
Right.
So effectively, we had a second night on the beer, which wasn't what we were expecting for the weekend. So again, started slowly because fellas were sheepish. They were kind of saying, no, we shouldn't have 2 nights on the beer. But sure, then once you get a couple of pints in, things began to flow a bit more easily, and it ended up, sure, we had 2 nights in the beer up in Antrim, and actually played good hurling against Antrim, and had a great weekend of it. I remember coming back down on the train on Sunday, and we had a kind of a players meeting amongst ourselves, and we said, lads, look, we're after having an absolutely fantastic weekend, not by design, almost by accident. We had an absolutely fantastic weekend, and the spirit, and that's one thing I've always said, it's kind of an intangible, Tomas, the spirit coming back that day from Antrim, albeit we all knew we were after doing the wrong thing, but there was a bond, there was a gel, there was a spirit that came from us all socialising together, all being together for the weekend, and being in a situation that we probably felt was a suboptimal situation, and we turned it into something kind of special. As I say, not by design. I'm not going to say just for 1 second it was by design, but the spirit coming down in that train was like something probably I hadn't experienced in a team before. And training on Tuesday night was electric. I mean, it was just like everything was perfect, and every player knew now it was time to put the shoulder to the wheel. And suddenly a spirit began to build, which hadn't been there prior to that weekend, and we kind of started building a bit of confidence in ourselves because we knew there was just something special happening here, and even though we were complete underdogs to go out and play Cork and didn't play as well as we could have played. It was a terrible day that day. Didn't play as well as we could have played. Missing Ken McGrath was our talisman, our focal point of the whole team. And we went out and beat a very fancy Cork team, which ended the reign of Bertie Og Murphy, I think was the manager at the time for his first year. And we had momentum behind us then. So that's the backstory there, Tomas.
Very, very good. And like from a coaching point of view, Fergal, what did Justin bring to the table that year after taking over from Gerald?
I mean, one thing Justin brought us was, Justin very much prided himself on his coaching and his coaching ability, and he was a great coach, to be fair. What he brought was a level of energy and enthusiasm and intensity to drills that probably, that was probably Justin's key strength. Another thing, to be fair, Justin brought to the party was he had a belief in himself and a belief in us that probably hadn't existed prior to Justin's arrival. Justin felt, he was a winner, simple as, and I suppose he'd proven that himself, he didn't care who he was managing. That team was good enough to beat whoever they were playing, and that for sure was something that rubbed off. Justin in some ways was unorthodox and wasn't a sports psychologist, but that kind of thing just seeps into a team, and that rubbed off on players. And like Justin instilled that in us to a large extent, that this kind of perhaps an inferiority complex we might have had playing the likes of Cork and Kilkenny and Tipperary. He didn't have it, and no matter what team he put on the field, he believed that team was good enough to beat whoever we played, and that kind of rubbed off. And so there were two things he brought. I'd say that coaching, that kind of that intensity he brought to all the drills he did. Everything he did, he wanted them done right, and he wanted them done at speed and pace and intensity and so on. He brought that and an energy. Justin was always in good humour. He was always energetic. He was always buzzed up. And they're the two things he brought, and to be fair, they paid dividend.
They sure did. And like on the morning of the match, Fergal, Babs Keaton wrote in the Sunday Times that Tip would win by 10 points or more. Were you made aware of those comments in the build-up?
Well, we made ourselves aware of them, and he actually made another comment at the time that Waterford supporters would be leaving with 15 minutes to go, or something to that effect anyway. And I look at, absolutely, that was something we spoke about, and that's something that riled us up. And, as you grow older, I suppose, sometimes you realise that sometimes those things are overplayed. We certainly were riled up over that. We certainly had a score to settle, but in reality, those things only get you so far as well. I think the big thing that day for me, about the Munster final, Tomas, was, and again, I would give Justin great credit for this, but it also came from the spirit that had come from the Antrim trip, I suppose, and the conversations we were having ourselves in terms of the belief in ourselves at this stage. I mean, we developed a new sense of a newfound belief going into that Tipperary game. That we looked through the Tipperary team forensically and said, look, they were all Ireland champions, but like, who are we to be afraid of? I mean, they had some great hurlers, they had Tommy Dunn and they had Owen Kelly in particular, and Brendan Cummins in the goal and so on. But like, who are we to be afraid of? Who had they got that were, we said, were too good for us? And they had some great hurlers, but we were looking at our team and looking at, players like Ken McGrath and Paul Flynn and so on. We felt we were every bit as good, and that's something that probably had been missing prior to that point. And I think that why I say that is because I remember that game. I mean, whereas we were probably, I wouldn't say we're in control for most of the game, but we were hurling very well for most of the game. But we were hit by sucker blows, 3 goals from Tipperary. And in the past, normally when a team like Tipperary got a goal, it was usually the point where they'd kick on and push on and drive on and win a game. But every time they got a goal, we responded. And that came from a real deep belief in ourselves that we kind of instilled in ourselves and just instilled in us, which heretofore hadn't been present. And I think that was the winning of the game more so than anything else, that when those sucker blows came, we had the ability to react. Every time almost, I think without fail, we went down at the other end and scored. And shortly after, I think it was shortly after Benny's done last goal, it was when Tony Brown, if I'm not mistaken, and you might correct me on this, but I think it was at that point Tony Brown got his goal, which
that's right, yeah,
typical Tony goal, and that was I think the point then whereby I think we knew then we could kick on from here. We weren't going thrown in the towel.
And like there was a very strong breeze going towards the Blackrock end that day, Fergal, and you went up for the toss, decided to go against it, but you were only a point down at half time, and Paul Flynn's goal was crucial in that from a close range free. Like, you've hurled alongside him like for most of your career with Waterford and Ballygunner. Like, what set him apart from other players?
Well, exactly that's what he did there, and I mean that was huge because going in against that breeze, 4 points certainly wouldn't have been unassailable for sure, and was very manageable. But going in only a point down on the back of that goal, I think gave us massive belief because, again, we'd spoken about the fact that we weren't going to, we had that belief that no matter what happened, we would recover, we would respond. But now going in at half time, knowing we were only a point down and going and playing with a gale force breeze in the second half, I think it gave us great, and it was the platform really for the win. But I mean, that's Paul Flynn. He stands up to a free like that, and the only person in the stadium knows what's going to happen is Paul Flynn. Like, right, it's not by instruction from the sideline. It's not by any kind of grand master plan. I mean, the only person who knows what he's going to do is Paul Flynn, and he could have tapped it over, but and there's very few players take on those kind of shots and whatnot, and that's what he does. That's what he brings, I suppose, and that's that level of unpredictability and that level of genius. That's what he can do.
And that Sunday night, Fergal, 10,000 people greeted you in Grattan Square in Dungarvan. What do you remember about that bus journey home?
I should look at it again. You were on a high for probably 12 hours. It was non-stop, and it was just electric. Everything about it from start to finish, and I remember Justin stopped the bus and we walked across the All Bridge and riding back to Dungarvan, and we knew there was going to be a reception in the crowd, but we didn't expect it to be at the level it was, and it was just memories that I suppose will last a lifetime and beyond. It was incredible. Going back to Dungarvan that night was just incredible, and the next few days, the reception in Waterford the following day, and just the goodwill from everybody. To a man, woman, child. Everybody who you encountered for the next week, all they were talking about was hurling and the Munster final, and it was back at a time when Waterford crowds going to games. I mean, Waterford crowds going to games of late and national leagues and whatnot are reducing to us for some reason. I don't know why that is, and for sure it's I don't want to call it a problem, but it's something we'd like to reverse. But back at those days, I mean, we were full houses for every game in Munster, regardless of what stage it was at, and the crowds that were following Waterford were huge, and there was a buzz and an energy around it that was just uplifting, and that week was just just an amazing week, really.
Yeah, and I believe you brought the cup back to Ballygunner on the Monday, Fergal. Would I be right in saying that?
We went under Jack Meads, we did. We did, yeah. We had a great day down there, and sure, that wasn't the end of it, as you can imagine. It went on from there and towards town, and I can't remember, actually, don't know where we were. I know we were going for the week anyway. I can't remember where we went after that, but it was a long, a great week, and as I say, the goodwill and the friendships, and they are enduring friendships. And I saw Ken McGrath interviewed there recently on somewhere online. I can't remember who the interviewer was.
I think it was Shane Stapleton on our
yes,
game.
Correct. But and Ken made the point, which is true, that there was a friendship there amongst inter-club friendship. Like, I mean, Ballygunner and Mount Sion played in a lot of county finals, and I marked Ken, and they were tough games, but the respect and the friendship that we would have had from those times, lasts to this day. Like, that's arguably the greatest thing you'll take from that era and from that team is the memories and the friendships. The medals. To be honest, my Munster medal is here somewhere. I can't say exactly where it is, but it's here somewhere in the house. But it's the memories and the friendships, and the likes of Ken, as I said there, and Tony. And when we do meet, we've great fun, we've great banter, and we've great. We take great enjoyment from looking back over the years and the fun we had, as opposed to necessarily the matches we played. And Ken alluded to that in his interview, that the respect and the friendship was great. The rivalry when we played each other club-wise was intense, and sometimes it boiled over, but it never went over the white line after the match, and never went on from there. And you could meet the next day or that night at a point, and it was back to the way it always was. So that was something that was special from that team, for sure. And
just a final question for you, Fergal. Have you any mementos from that Munster final still lying around the house?
No, I'm not a great one. I have a whole load of jerseys up in a loft there somewhere, but I'm not a great one for all that kind of stuff. Tomas, I'm not, no. So I don't have a huge amount. I haven't actually seen the game. I mean, obviously, I'd like to be modest and say it was all for analysis purpose. But at the time, I suppose in 2002, shortly afterwards, I watched it a couple of times, but I literally haven't seen it since then. So I haven't probably seen it in God knows how long. So must be something I'd like to do at some stage again with my own kids who've probably never seen it. But certainly every time I think about it, I can even remember, you asked me about after the match, and I can remember distinctly the feeling of literally goosebumps going all the way down my neck and my back and whatnot, and almost getting that my body tightening up, clenching with just the nervous excitement, the emotion and whatnot. And that feeling when we speak about it, I can actually remember that feeling. It was so special. It was only a handful of times in your life. I remember actually probably after the under-21 All-Ireland in 92, the exact same feeling, and that was a tighter game, I suppose, and the exact same feeling. And you only get them a handful of times in your life, and it's worth all the tears and the heartache and all the long, hard winter nights. It makes it all worthwhile. But for mementos and whatnot, no, not great for all that kind of stuff, but the feeling and the memories, for sure. And I can't remember, Jesus, Tomas, I can't remember what happened last week. But I remember the 5 minutes after that game, like it was yesterday,
Great stuff. Well, Fergal, thanks a million for your time this evening. I'm sure it's brought back a lot of fond memories for Waterford fans that are listening in at this very difficult time. Take care of yourself, and we'll catch up with you very soon.
Thanks, Tomas. Talk soon.
Now you're hurling. Lorna Porca with Tomas McCarthy on WLR.
Thanks to PwC Waterford.